Okay, so before we get started, get into the meat of this here, I'd like to go over some housekeeping. Now, we've been getting some listener feedback, and I'd like to make sure that you guys are heard. We want to be responsive to that and make this a good listener experience, where we can make some adjustments to the intro and to the structure. We'd like to keep the podcast time to about an hour. The second episode where we had it like 3.5 hours long, that's not going to be a normal thing.
Yeah, guys, we totally recognize that was excessive. What we wanted to try and do was provide a good platform of where we stand, so you understand both our kind of inbuilt biases and where we're coming from when we discuss these issues.
Yeah, it's fine that not a lot of people are going to watch that one specifically, but I feel like it's a good thing to just have it available as a reference. Um, I realize that I'm not the best speaker, which can be a problem for a podcast, but that's something I plan on improving as I get used to this. This is not a normal thing for me, but I should be important. I feel like it's important, so we'll just keep trudging on ahead.
We're just starting out, guys.
Yeah. So we have been thinking about what we're going to do for editing. We had there someone mentioned an idea for editing out the pauses, but I think last time we talked about this, you said that we thought maybe it's probably better just to have it the recording be a representation of what our conversation actually sounds like.
I personally am not that much of a fan of the super clip to YouTube vlogger kind of aesthetic of the pauses and the breath takes and everything kind of being edited out. Like we want to have just the idea is these are just conversations.
Yeah.
It's a discussion. And we want to do our best to present a good product to you guys, but we don't want to like over edit everything in the process. So
yeah. And let's see. I did get a mention. I did hear a suggestion from someone about they were interested in hearing us talk more about the notion of the post-truth era and the tension of political expediency versus truth in terms of what kinds of messages get out there. And I think you said last time that this is probably just going to be an ongoing theme.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't like it, but the idea of relativistic truth and especially kind of the way we discuss politics, independent of any kind of partisan agenda, is going to be an ongoing theme in these discussions. It's going to crop up over and over again because it's one of the most predominant issues affecting modern political discussion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, uh, and you can, if you want to help us out, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, or you can follow us on Minds. To get an update for future episodes. We're trying to make this a weekly episode content. You can contact us anonymously at section32@protonmail.com. We'll put some links in the description along with some of the articles we're talking about today. And, leave us a comment, have a discussion. That's all good. We like feedback. And I've gotten some people talking about asking me if I'm going to make money off of this, and I hope to in the future. But right now, we just need to make the content and get some exposure. The first episode had like 22 views. The second one had like 4. So it doesn't make sense to try to ask people for money at this point.
We are still quite firmly in the proof of concept stage. So.
Yes. Pay me in exposure.
And just like seriously, I mean, I know all the memes about YouTube comments, but just discussion on YouTube, we're all about. We would love to get more of that. So,
Yeah, yeah. And let's see. Yeah, and please, share links to people you think would like this. Uh, Keep giving us feedback. We can address the topics you'd like to hear more about. And in the future, we're interested in expanding the network of contacts that we have.
our whole goal
And
with this endeavor is further engagement and discussion with people who don't necessarily agree with us. So, if you think we're idiots and you want to say something, let us know, please.
yeah, well, I mean, hopefully it can be a more productive discussion than
Sure.
you're an idiot and you're wrong. But I mean, if you want to start there, let's start there, and hopefully go somewhere beyond that.
In terms of everyone talking past each other, I'd almost welcome the "you're an idiot, shut the fuck up" as like, okay, progress, communication has been achieved. So, all right. Which one of our myriad stories do you want to start with today?
All right. I guess we'll start with Jussie Smollett.
Ah,
That that
yes.
that feels like it's the right one to start with.
I'll let you go first.
So I think last time we tried recording, you had a pretty good summarization of this.
Sure. Um, the basic gist is this. So Jussie Smollett is a black and homosexual actor.
Isn't he
Um,
part Jewish too?
maybe I really didn't pay attention to that aspect of the drama. He might be part Jewish. I don't really care. But he plays a part in a show on the Fox channel called Empire. I must confess, prior to this drama coming about, I had not heard of the show Empire before. Apparently, it's had multiple seasons. But the basic gist is Jussie Smollett is an actor on a show, and late January of this year, he claimed to have been attacked in a hate crime in downtown Chicago. Now, from the onset, there were multiple things that made people in. I'm going to highlight local media on this one. Local media kind of smelled the bullshit quite early. Um, there were multiple aspects of his story that kind of raised some questions. So, to give you the initially presented story, Jussie Smollett was coming back from Subway, the sandwich restaurant, at like 2 a.m. in downtown Chicago during the middle of a polar vortex. So I believe it was negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit outside. And he was walking back to his apartment in another similarly like well-off neighborhood within downtown Chicago, where carrying his Subway sandwich, where two white men, he insisted, wearing MAGA hats, he insisted, accosted him in an alley and repeatedly assaulted him, poured bleach on him. For those who don't have a layman's understanding of chemistry, I'll point out negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit is a fair bit below the freezing temperature for bleach. So just something to point out.
They must not have been waiting around that long then, huh?
Yeah, clearly that just came right out of an apartment.
And
Put
just happened to meet a celebrity.
a noose around his neck, not like it didn't even, according to police reports, look like a noose. But we'll get past that.
I saw a YouTube comment that said this was a fake noose.
Fake news. That's also really funny. Anyways, he claimed that he had been attacked in a hate crime from Trump supporting white rednecks who yelled, "This is MAGA country" at him in downtown Chicago at 2 a.m. in negative 20-degree weather. Needless to say, from what I can tell, looking at like what leaks came out of Chicago police at the time, no one took this story remotely seriously in an investigative role. Or, for that matter, credit where credit's due. Local media, Chicago reporters did not believe this really at the onset, but national media profiles and a fair number of Twitter blue checkmark celebrities ran with it as some horrific hate crime. This is Trump's America. This is, evidence of how, pervasive racism is within American society. There was a lot of brouhaha in late January. As February began to kind of soldier on, there was more and more evidence that, hey, this looks increasingly like he faked it, that he hired two black dudes. And this is a bit of a misnomer that went through the media. They're not actually Nigerian. They're Americans. They're African Americans. They just happen to be of Nigerian descent. But because they fled to Nigeria right after executing this hate crime and came back right before they were arrested, that's kind of the meme that spread. But there's evidence that basically he paid these two brothers to assault him in a staged hate crime underneath a camera he thought was running. Turns out in downtown Chicago, it was just about the only one that wasn't. And eventually, as of, I believe, last week, the Chicago police charged him with filing a false police report, and they arrested him for doing so. And I believe right now he has like $1 million bail, and he's still in custody, last I heard. But like you would expect, this incident has generated a lot of kind of meta discussion about the nature of how we prosecute hate crimes, the nature of how we've maybe kind of incentivized victimhood to some extent, and how much national media profiles, and I am intentionally distinguishing them from local media because local media never bought this.
Yeah, props to them.
Yeah, 100%. Chicago reporters, you did good work with this case. You did. But it's generated a lot of kind of discussion about how much we take seriously a lot of these hate crime hoaxes, which is a growing trend as we almost perversely incentivize people to have bigotry laden reasons for crime to happen. And when the demand for hate crimes exceeds the local supply, right? This isn't the first time this has happened. That's an unfortunate truth. I recall in particular, in the wake of Trump being elected, a number of hijabi women were claiming that they had random dudes come up and rip off their hijabs and say something Trump related. And I can think of like 3 cases off the top of my head where it wound up being that they dated a white boy or they'd done something that would like make their parents mad at them, so they claimed it was a hate crime to not get in trouble, right? Like, this is one of the problems with a lot of our overemphasis on victimhood protection is we've incentivized people to be victims when it's convenient.
Yeah, and I don't want to run defense for Donald Trump, but
absolutely not.
I think it's important to recognize that, individuals have their own agency, and like if Donald Trump is being kind of an asshole, like I don't see that there's all that much of a connection between that and another person deciding to be kind of a jerk. Like there
Yeah.
might be some kind of influence, like the man is he's a cultural icon and the representative of the nation in terms of like the government at least, but like you have to treat people as they're responsible for their own actions.
I think I almost have a more like pedestrian complaint with it than you do, which is, as I kind of said to a friend recently, there's so much material to work with in terms of things Trump does that are unproductive or unhelpful or not working, that all these like hate crime hoaxes and then going about this is Trump's America, it's just a lazy cop out for all the obvious stuff you could criticize instead. Like, this is kind of my preeminent criticism of a lot of the progressive left now when it comes to discussing politics. Is there so much workable material when it comes to Donald J. Trump in terms of policy, in terms of beliefs, that this constant reliance on the dumbest, the pettiest, the most fraudulent methods of criticizing him when there's so much material to work with already? It's just pathetic. It makes me mad.
I'm kind of equally upset at certain conservatives that blame Obama for making the racial tension, the race relations worse in America. Like, I mean, I don't know. Maybe he could have handled the whole issue in a more competent way, but I just don't see him. I just don't see him as the primary person responsible for however things are.
I personally think he could have handled the Trayvon Martin case much better than he ultimately did, especially since for some reason that was being painted as a white versus black thing when it was a Peruvian American against a black dude. But I do agree there's a over reliance on the Obama kind of like strategy of political critique that I find quite intellectually exhausting.
Yeah, like he hasn't been president for years now. It's kind of time to move on that, I think.
I mean, yeah, most of what I see in terms of like that kind of stuff nowadays is kind of pointing out that whatever new evil thing Trump does isn't without precedent within the Obama administration.
That's fair. That is fair.
The kids in cages thing, textbook example, right? That happened in 2014. Obama built a border fence in his presidency. Like, one of the more frustrating things for me as someone who started out Obama's presidency being very, very solidly Democrat is people pretending he didn't do the authoritarian bullshit he did so they can pretend Trump doing it is some new evil. I quit the party because he did the authoritarian bullshit he did. So I'm kind of frustrated on that standpoint. But
yeah,
I don't think it's,
it was extra disappointing since he ran on the whole Hope and Change platform.
Oh yeah, total fake progressive. Made me really mad because of it as a kid. So
yeah, I believe I was 18 when I voted for him.
Same.
So
I 100% bought into Hope and Change. I thought we were gonna like have Bush up for the Hague, and I thought we were gonna roll back the surveillance state, and boy was I wrong.
yeah, when you're young and you're just aware of politics during the Bush era, and then when you can finally vote, you get to vote for Obama, and
especially against McCain and fucking Sarah Palin. I mean, come the fuck on. Yeah, that was against the literal neocon, and okay, I'm gonna draw some eye here. I'm gonna say it. Right-wing Ocasio-Cortez.
I have heard that comparison made, and I don't feel like disputing. I don't feel like disputing.
Yeah, it's not unjustified.
It's yeah.
All right. Do we have anything more of substance to say about the Smollett case? I mean, I mostly find it quite depressing. I'm glad I in the lost recording session we did for this, I did say I'm glad we finally have a high profile enough example of these hate crime hoaxes to say maybe we've gone a bit too far.
Yeah.
I'm glad that exists. I'm not glad any of this happened. I'm not glad that this man, for whatever reason, he claims it was drugs. I think it's just straight up mental illness, but I'm not glad he got himself into hot water over this. I'm not glad that he thought it was necessary to scam two Nigerians to pay 3,500 for a fake hate crime because
Nigerian Americans.
Nigerian Americans. But like, it's just I liked the jokes that came out of it. I find the overall situation sad, and liking the jokes is how I cope with it. So that's about where I'm at.
Yeah, and yeah, there are some other incidences of fake hate crimes, like the that woman that burned her house down with her
Oh
pets in
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah,
Was that the trans woman who claimed anti-trans people burned down her house, and turns out
I
she did it and killed a cat?
I think this is a trans man.
Oh, okay.
So I guess the socially appropriate thing to do would be to use the male pronoun, but
I do apologize. I've only skimmed the headlines, so I'm not as informed on this particular case as I would like to be.
yeah. Okay, so
Do you want to move to the textbook case of how faking hate crimes hurts legitimate cases of them?
oh yeah, I think a good example would be Majid Nawaz.
Yes.
Yeah, I felt bad for that guy. So apparently this is in London. He was outside a theater. He this is the story that we got from his Twitter. He bent down to pick over his phone, and someone came up from behind, punched him in the face, gave him a black eye, scar on his forehead, and he'd called him like a fucking packy, and then ran
Yep.
away. And there were people who had heard what the guy said, and they helped the guy out, got him to hospital, and he's got pictures of his injuries at different levels, at different stages of development, and posted them on Twitter as this
Yeah.
was all unfolding.
From what I've seen so far, I don't have any reason to think this one isn't legitimate, but I will point out that when I scrolled across it in my Twitter feed, because I do follow Majid Nawaz, I find him a very engaging public figure to kind of get his opinion on political issues in the Western world. I thought this was a joke. I thought this was him making fun of the Jussie Smollett case. I had to get 2 or 3 tweets into it to realize he actually had been assaulted.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we're talking about when we talk about how if you fake this shit, people are going to have a more skeptical initial mindset about these issues. And that's
Yeah,
why it's unproductive. That's why it's not helpful to fake this shit. Especially because, I mean, we didn't mention this, but according to the Chicago PD, the reason Jussie Smollett faked all these hate crimes, the beat up in the alley wasn't the only one. He also mailed a fake anthrax letter to his film studio to make
and
the
they
TV
kept
show.
the magazine where they clipped for the
Yeah,
letter.
these weren't Galaxy Brain. Well, these were Galaxy Brains running
Ironic
this
Galaxy Brain.
operation, but faking multiple hate crimes makes me hear an account like Majid's where he's saying, I was randomly beat up by some random English chav who beat me with a signet ring and called me a fucking packy. And my initial take on that is, oh, he's making fun of the Jussie Smollett thing because it's that unbelievable. But this actually happened from all
Yeah,
accounts.
yeah, like racism is real.
Racism is real, and it's so counterproductive to fake it for the
Yeah.
sake of, in the case of Jussie Smollett, getting a better salary out of the TV show you're on.
How entitled can you be?
You fucking moron.
Yeah.
Like,
Jesus.
I try my best to avoid just like descending into just cussing out people, but you fucking idiot. Get fucked.
Yeah. Well,
Talk about damaging your own political cause.
I'm not going to make a statement quite like that, but I will say that I'm looking forward to justice being served here, and I do feel that it's appropriate that he's being charged with I believe a felony.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Think about
The
how many police hours tracking down your stolen bike or your looted, mailbox. Because Chicago PD was very clear they did not deprioritize murder cases because that's a preeminent problem Chicago has. So all of the petty shit that you have to deal with that you're relying on the police department for, this asshole deprioritized that in suit of his ego. I like I said, it just infuriates me. It's such a gratuitous waste of public resources in service of your own ego. Like it as close to a moral offense as I can take, that's where I come in. I'm just it's not okay.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh, so one of the sources that I think people have been using for the fake hate crimes is fakehatemap.com. Uh, I mentioned this with someone I was talking to, and he said that apparently there were some cases that were on that site that were not entirely accurately represented. So I'm not going to present that source as like definitive, but there's over 600 incidents. I'm not gonna have the time to fact check everyone.
Yeah, it's my understanding. I mean, the one I usually go for instead of fake hate map is hoaxes.com, if that's still a thing.
Hatehoaxes.com. I want to look at that one.
I mean, they're all. This is part of the frustrating thing with this topic is a lot of the sources trying to prove that this is the thing that happens, and it is the thing that happens. You have evidence of it, but a lot of them are have a bit of a hair trigger for what they consider a hoax. You know,
Yeah, like
um,
some of the fact checking that's been going on is just ridiculous pedantry these days.
oh, I think we're in a horrible age of fact checking. Like it's all rules lawyering, essentially.
Yeah.
It's incredibly frustrating.
Okay. And so with these people becoming more aware of the hate crime hoaxes, uh, I feel like it's time to uh, for people to start realizing that uh, the perception of a rise in or right wing or bigoted violence, and I want to distinguish those two concepts.
Sure,
Uh, I
anti-government does not mean racist Nazi all the
yeah,
time.
yeah, and like the idea there's this rise in violent incidents and hate crimes. Uh, I believe a lot of it is just you know originating in someone's rhetoric or someone's like a convenient narrative here. Uh, I don't think it's fair to say that there's an epidemic. I think the Unite the Right rally in what was going on in Charlottesville, that was probably the apex of all of that.
Well, and even that is possibly the most misinterpreted political event in modern history. At least post 2000, I would say the
What,
most
what
because I'm not going to say that the Unite the Right was good. It was mostly a lot of idiots, but I maintain the vast majority of that protest was not white nationalists. It was anarcho-capitalists or extreme libertarians. One of the things you learn when you study these movements in some detail is there's a lot of different factions along the extreme right, and not all of them are motivated solely by racism. And I do kind of firmly believe that the tiki tortures, the actual white nationalists, you will not replace us marching types, probably were numerically minority at that particular event. And that's even after all the reasonable groups said this is going to be a disaster fire and pulled out. You know, I don't believe there's a serious contingent of white nationalists in America. I really don't. And
Yeah.
I don't dispute that the events at that rally were tragic. I don't dispute that they were um, not a good sign of the development of American political relations. But I don't think we have a resurgence of unironic Klansmen in the United States. I think that's buying into the narrative of people who want you scared, who want you uh, extremist and agitated and willing to do whatever if it will let you punch Nazis. I don't think the two are mutually exclusive.
Yeah. And the whole punching Nazis meme, that's like I think that's something I wanted to comment on. Like if your method of fighting Nazis is to punch them, that's that's not effective.
I
Like
Yeah, it's the
that
kind of like left wing meme where I want to say, have any of you idiots actually read a book about the Weimar Republic? Because I have, and you know what? You know what got a lot of moderate support for the Nazi Party to happen? It was radical communists repeatedly diagnosing everyone to the right of Stalin as a far right extremist and punching them that got the moderate majority to say, actually, we'd really much rather prefer you take out the group of radical communists who keep punching all of us in the streets. I'm not saying that was a good decision. Ultimately, it ended terribly for Germany. But if your only way to engage with people who aren't already within your political group is violence, and you're the first one to instigate it, which is what happened with the original anti-fascists in Nazi Germany or Weimar Germany at the time, and it's kind of what happened with the free speech, Kekistan types in free speech rallies recently. You just make the moderate majority take the side of whoever promises to crack commie skulls because all they do is keep punching people. It's never a good look to be the first party to instigate violence. And I don't care how much you try and wrap up this idea that violence is possible through rhetoric and not through interpersonal violence. No one else is going to buy that, and they're all going to be pissed off when you punch them in the face.
yeah, like I would much rather people call me nasty things than punch me in the face.
I just don't get why we've moved so far beyond what happened with the neo-Nazi group in Illinois in the 70s in the ACLU. Just fucking laugh at them. They're neo-Nazis. That's a contemptible, laughable position.
Yeah.
Social shaming is so much more effective in suppressing this kind of bullshit than just like assuming everyone who tangentially agrees with a political opinion you dislike must be a fucking Nazi, and you need to start going on some autistic internet warrior crusade to beat them all up in the streets.
And I we mentioned social shaming. Um, I would much rather that take the form of comedy than by like just the excessive, condescending, aggressive moralizing that I see sometimes.
Yeah, ridicule.
Yeah,
Ridicule is so powerful. Why have we abandoned it?
because all the comedians are too afraid to say anything real,
They all want
except
applause
except
instead
for
of laughter.
yeah, except for what Louis C.K. He's been burned by this whole thing, so now he's just free to say whatever he wants.
I don't know what Louis C.K.'s angle is on this. He's like so confusing from both his personal actions and the weird persona he puts on. I don't know what he's angling for.
I I think he's pretty unsure of what he's doing himself.
Yeah.
Um, I was speaking of white supremacy. Not that that's not segueing from Louis C.K. By the way, I don't believe that Louis C.K. is a white supremacist. Although that might make for some interesting material. Uh, there was a Coast Guard someone in the
Right.
Coast Guard who was like a like white supremacist or some radical who was planning to shoot up some like just go on some killing spree, and he was
Yeah.
on drugs, and they found a bunch of guns and ammo on in his possession.
And
Yeah.
he's an Anders Breivik fan,
Yeah,
apparently.
I guess he was going after some Democrats and left-wing media types. So
Yep.
that I imagine like I'm imagining the timeline where he's successful in that, and I'm just thinking, Jesus, that would be so much more difficult to untangle.
Well, just ignoring the whole I don't want to deal with the media ramifications of a far right media extremist, which is what this guy looks like. I mean, top on his hit list were Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer.
I
Ignoring the whole like, oh man, it'd be so much harder to have like a center left or a non crazy TDS viewpoint in this environment aspect, because I don't think really that's what's important. But I'm just glad he wasn't able to do anything because a lot of people would have died.
yeah, that's important too.
I, I the biggest thing I find genuinely concerning about modern politics is the degree of political extremism. And I'll admit I'm somewhat culpable in that. You know, there's a lot of people in Washington. I've been one to casually make jokes that I think the only way we could really reform the federal government is if a nuke went off when both houses of Congress are in session and the president was around and the Supreme Court was in session. So
What
I'm not
is that
beyond
radical centrism?
pretty much. I'm not beyond making some pretty macabre jokes about how little faith I have in the federal government, but I'm always glad when I find someone who actually wanted to try this shit gets shut down. It's it's a reassurance that all this other nonsense aside, all of this division, all of this hatred, all of this inability to have a genuine discussion with people who disagree with you politically, I'm glad at the end of the day, a lot of you know the people who are responsible for keeping the shit from getting too crazy are able to do their jobs.
Yeah, it's
I don't like we're in a state where this is a recurring feature. Um, I was genuinely distressed by the one crazy anthrax male dude who got locked up from Florida recently, but it's always a good thing that violence is avoided because once we firmly break that taboo, I studied history. I saw what happened to the Roman Republic once the violence taboo was broken. You don't come back from that. It's it ends badly.
like it's hard enough getting people to talk to each other when they just don't like each other, when they're like when there's like serious widespread active violence. That's it takes a while to sort it
Well,
out.
this is why when the dust ups with Antifa began, I got so angry about it. It wasn't because I was like, "Oh, the left wingers hit it first." I'm pretty middle of the road on the left versus right spectrum. Like I don't really have a dog in that race. I didn't like it because just I've seen what happens. I've studied what happens when people start beating each other in the streets, and it never ends well. It's a very slippery slope to walk.
Yeah, so maybe instead of picking up a gun, grab a microphone. That's what I'm trying to do.
Or, even if you don't want to grab a microphone, the best advice I can give for people who are very concerned about the world because of the opinions they counter on the internet, have a discussion with people in your local community.
Yeah.
Have a discussion with people in real life, because I think the internet distorts the preeminence of certain opinions. Like, yeah.
Have you ever had a moment where you're just arguing an idea in your own head and you don't see another human face for a little while and you just get angrier and angrier, and then you go outside and you maybe try to say something to someone, express something you're upset with, and just a lot of that just fades away?
Yeah, or if I can share something extremely silly. Um,
Yeah.
I post more often than I should because my office doesn't block it. I post more than I should to Reddit, right? And specifically the Seattle subreddit, which is a lot of things. And I was so frustrated about this one argument I got in with some idiot who thought we needed to bring like Soviet style housing blocks to fix the homelessness solution.
Oh boy.
And I mentioned to someone in real life, someone I knew, someone who I was like friendly with, and who I knew was still probably a bit further to the political left than I am at this point. But I had a genuine discussion with him in real life, and he's like, "That's fucking silly." What? I think people have a hard time, and this is one of those reasons why, and you've heard me say this, I don't know if this has made it to the episodes yet. I think social media might be a great filter. I think social media might be one of the reasons why certain advanced civilizations don't exist long enough to propel enough radio waves into space for aliens to discover us or for us to discover them. I think it gives you an incredibly warped perception of what your average Joe in your local community believes. And it's so important to disconnect and have those discussions in the real world.
Have you ever imagined what would happen if everyone suddenly developed the ability to read each other's minds? Just have perfect knowledge of what the person in front of you is thinking?
I think I've seen like 4 movies with that premise.
Yeah. I kind of feel like maybe social media is kind of like a downscaled version of that.
I'll tell you, this is entirely off topic, and I apologize in advance. Social media has killed the pro choice movement because without a filter, so many people are revealing their goal with pro choice advocacy is has nothing at all to do with the societal benefits of abortion being available and has a whole lot to do with all the like stereotypes the right wing used to accuse pro choice people of.
Mhm.
Social media has done in my opinion, I'm still pro choice, but I think it's done irrevocable harm to that end of the discussion
There
because it's lack of a filter.
there are people that just uh, by all appearances they derive some sick joy out of the idea of destroying fetuses or babies or whatever.
Well, can you imagine shout your abortion being a thing in 2004? I can't.
Oh
Can
God.
you imagine the I'm not going to say this is widespread. I don't think it's widespread at all, but the opinion among certain, I'm going to call them uh, certain pro-choice activists, that having an abortion is a feminist act and you need to do one to be a good feminist.
Yeah. Wait, did
I'm
we
not
talk?
saying it's anywhere near a majority, but you're making the movement look really bad.
Yeah, it's not great. Wait,
No,
did
not at
did we
all.
did we bring this up in another podcast?
We might have brought it up in the political compass episode. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well,
Anyway,
it
we
it
we
it,
could move
it
on.
didn't
Like I said,
become
this is
any
very
less horrible.
yeah.
All right. Was there anything else that we wanted to address?
Uh, the only one of our articles we wanted to kind of go over. and this is a pretty short one. It's more just like again, in the same vein of people who used to consider themselves far more left, kind of criticizing the left. Do you want to talk about the student body of UC Berkeley being completely unable to tolerate conservative positions on their campus?
Yeah, that's messed up. So there was this. So the article it's on CNN site, which is it's cool that they're reporting on this. Conservative activist allegedly attacked on UC Berkeley campus. Um, yeah, so I guess Turning Point USA was around, and the guy. Okay, if someone is filming you, don't continue to attack them.
Well, this is why they SWAT you if you have a phone out. This is why they're so. I don't know. I don't know if you've watched as much of like the footage from all of these. Full disclosure: I lived in the Bay Area recently, and went to Berkeley frequently. So there's a reason they SWAT at you if you have a cell phone out, even if you're not filming, and it's because they're very paranoid about evidence, essentially. But I find it extremely depressing. So the gist of this incident is a guy was tabling for a conservative group. I assume the Berkeley Young Republicans. I'm not really sure. It doesn't say so in the article. Korean students were Turner Point USA. So moderately right wing organization. They're only conservative extremists if you're an anarchist, and
I'm not familiar with their politics, so if you're wrong on this, I'm not going to be able to
I'll
it.
take full responsibility. I've heard the Turning Point name enough to know that I kind of assume I associate it more with like the boomer right wing media than like serious alt right conservatives.
That sound like my impression is that sounds like it's probably accurate.
Yeah, I'm
For what that's worth.
hardcore. I'll admit it up front, but basically this guy was tabling for them and a random student assaulted him for tabling for a right-wing organization, and I personally find it deeply sad that the college campus that was the most heavily associated with the free speech movement in the 60s has students now violently assaulting anyone who isn't within the local orthodoxy.
Yeah, it's I I just I just feel some sort of sense of betrayal after, like in in previous decades, like when I was becoming politically aware as a kid during the Bush administration, like I felt like I was correctly identifying on the left that there were a lot of really good principles that would be helpful for a functioning, harmonious society. And now in the Trump era, like I see a lot of people who were, you know, in these traditionally left-wing groups abandon some of those principles that were, I believe, most important to what made what gave the left a higher moral standing. And now it's just
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
they don't seem to represent what I'm interested in at all. The mainstream, at least.
I also find like I don't like quoting Dave Rubin because I think he's kind of a silly person, but um, I didn't shift. The left left me. You know, I came of age in the lead up to the Iraq War politically. I was going to a school that was majority kids who, you know, when we had mock elections in school, I mean, I was in suburban Colorado, when we had mock elections, my entire class voted Bush in the 2004 mock election. I got a lot of flack for voting Kerry. You know, I I have always considered myself stridently left wing on a lot of the and committed to the idea of social tolerance and liberalism and free speech and the arena of ideas. Like these were all things I hardcore subscribed to as a kid. It's how I was raised. You know, my dad's two favorite authors are Kerouac and Kesey. Like it's just kind of how I was brought up. And the fact that we've moved so far beyond this we can kill them with debate. We can kill them with tolerance, with kindness. We can kill them by just they have dinosaur ideas and we can prove them wrong. And how that shifted into this concept of anyone who talks something that's funny or subversive is a fascist, or anyone who advocates for a smaller government is a fascist. I'm sorry, you're claiming fascists want a smaller, more limited government? Like, come on, show some basic political literacy with this shit. Like,
Really? Yeah.
and I'll admit that I'm personally triggered on this because I have family that grew up in Berkeley. I know that campus. That's my sister's alma mater. I am deeply familiar with UC Berkeley. And the decline it's had, the change in the kind of kid who goes to school there and studies all the useless degrees. Because I maintain the vast majority of Berkeley students, they keep their head down, they focus on their studies, and they do what they got to do. And they ignore all this shit. This is like some small sect of all the trust funded kids or the legacy admissions or what have you who are trying to turn Berkeley into another shitty Ivy League school and are just ruining the reputation of this institution. And I don't like seeing, as much as I find it funny how pathetic a lot of American institutions have become, as much as I like the fact that more people are coming to realize how pathetic those institutions are, I still don't like that the institutions are pathetic.
Yeah.
And that includes UC Berkeley.
Yeah, it's like these
Do better.
yeah, these trends they'd be disheartening if they happened like a generation in the future, but these are like some massive shifts that have happened in like within a decade.
I don't even want it to happen to generation in the future. I don't want my kids growing up in this bullshit. Like,
Yeah. Like it just goes to show you that you can't trust a culture or an institution to maintain its sanity and integrity just as a given over
well,
a long period of time.
and I'll say it's funny when it's like Evergreen or Mizzou, like some small private school located in a heroin town, or some small Missouri State school. It's funny when it happens there. When it's the number one ranked school on the West Coast, it's a little more alarming.
Yeah. And speaking of Evergreen, I feel like I want to give a shout out to a Benjamin Boyce. He's got a YouTube channel where he's documenting some of the craziness there.
Oh yeah, that's the what's he studying? The student who's doing the YouTube channel. Is he actually still there?
I don't know. It kind of feels like that's I don't know that he's a student there, but I I feel like for the content that he produces, it wouldn't make sense for him to move.
No, totally. I just
Yeah.
the Evergreen drama was long enough ago and at a different enough like far enough in the past that I kind of wonder if it seems recent to us because we're out of school, but he's like graduated a couple of years ago because once you're out of school, time flies.
Yeah. Yeah. So, gosh, what else is there?
I think for this week, that's pretty much it. We can probably do a brief sum up, but that's just about everything we've covered. So
Yeah. Well, thanks for the talk, and let's do this again next week.
Sounds great.
Goodbye, guys.